I was just a girl with a ring, until the Alpha King recognized his promise. Prologue. They threw my mother's ring into the mud, right there, in front of everyone. In front of the entire pack gathered in the stone courtyard of Ashvale Keep, under a sky so gray it looked like God had given up on the day. The beta's wife, Councilwoman Dreva, picked it up with 2 fingers like it was something dead. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. "This," she said, holding it up so the crowd could see, "is a fake, a lie, a piece of scrap metal a dying woman used to trick this pack into feeding her half-breed daughter for 17 years. The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Some looked away. I stood in the mud in bare feet, my dress torn at the shoulder where they'd dragged me from my bed before sunrise. My hair was loose and wild. My hands were shaking. But I did not cry. I had learned a long time ago that tears only fed the wolves who wanted to see you broken. Dreva dropped the ring back into the mud at my feet. "You have until sundown," she said. "Leave Ashvale, or we'll remove you ourselves." I looked down at the ring. It was old, thin. The metal was dark, almost black, with a single symbol carved into the band. Something I had traced with my fingertip every night since my mother pressed it into my palm the morning she died. I picked it up. I slid it back onto my finger, and I looked Dreva directly in her pale, cruel eyes. "I'll leave," I said quietly, "but not because you told me to." What happened next, I never could have prepared for. Before we step into the story, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Are you hearing this under the midnight moon, or in the quiet of the afternoon? Drop it in the comments. Now, let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Girl in the Mud. My name is Seren Vael, and the morning they threw me out of Ashvale Pack, I was 17 years old, standing barefoot in October mud, wearing a dress that used to belong to a girl who hated me. Let me paint it for you exactly as I remember it, because some mornings I still wake up there, still feel the cold stone beneath my feet, still smell the wood smoke and wet earth and something sharp underneath it all. Something like fear. Mine. Theirs. I was never sure. Ashvale Keep sat on the edge of the Morvain Forest in the northern highlands, a place where the trees grew so old and close together that even midday looked like dusk. The pack had lived there for generations. Stone buildings, iron gates, cobblestone paths worn smooth by decades of boots and paws. It should have been beautiful. In pictures, it probably was. But beauty, I had learned, is something you only get to enjoy when you belong. I had never belonged. My mother, Lisa Vael, came to Ashvale 18 years ago. She was a rogue, unmated, unranked, carrying nothing but a worn traveling pack and whatever was growing inside her. The pack alpha at the time, old Councilman Barrack, let her stay out of what everyone called mercy. What it actually was, I think, was strategy. A debt he owed someone he never named. My mother never told me who my father was. She said only this, the morning she died. "The ring will know when it's time. Don't take it off, not ever. No matter what they say about it." She was gone before noon. I was 9 years old. For 8 years after that, I lived in Ashvale as what they called a ward, which was just a polite word for tolerated burden. I ate last. I slept in the storage room off the kitchen. I did the work that ranked wolves considered beneath them, hauling wood, scrubbing floors, mending gear, running messages in the rain. I did it without complaint, because complaining required hope, and hope was something I had learned to ration very carefully. Dreva had been watching me for years, waiting. She was the beta's mate, which in Ashvale made her the second most powerful woman in the pack. She had 3 daughters, Morel, Cassa, and Vin, all ranked, all promised to good matches, all polished like silverware before company arrived. And she had hated my mother. I never knew why exactly, but hate like Dreva's doesn't need a good reason. It just needs a target. The morning everything broke open started the night before. Morel, Dreva's eldest, had come back from a trade visit to the southern packs, furious and humiliated. Some alpha's son had looked past her entirely, ignored her. And Morel had come home with her pride bleeding in a way that needed someone else to pay for it. That someone was me. She said I had stolen a bracelet from her traveling case. She said she had witnesses. She said I had been sneaking through her things for months. Every word was a lie. I had never touched her case. I had never wanted anything that belonged to her. But the story spread through Ashvale the way fire moves through dry grass, fast, hungry, and completely indifferent to the truth. By midnight, the beta had convened a pack meeting. By 2 a.m, I had been dragged from my bed. By sunrise, I was standing in the courtyard mud. What struck me, even then, was how organized it felt. How prepared. The crowd assembled too quickly. Dreva had her speech ready before I even arrived. The ring was already the target before anyone said a single word about the bracelet. They had been planning this. The bracelet was just the excuse. When Dreva held up my mother's ring and called it fake, I felt something move inside me. Not rage. I was past rage. It was something quieter and more dangerous. Something that said, they are afraid of something they don't understand, and they are trying to destroy it before it destroys them. I didn't know what the ring was. Not yet. I just knew my mother had made me promise. So when Dreva dropped it back into the mud, I picked it up without hesitation. I pressed it back onto my finger, and I felt it, the faintest pulse. Barely there, like a heartbeat from something sleeping very deep. I told Dreva I would leave, and I meant it, not because I was afraid of her, not because I was giving up, but because Ashvale had never been my home. It had been my cage, and she had just unlocked the door. I went back to the storage room. I had almost nothing to pack. A change of clothes, a small knife, a pouch of dried berries I'd been saving for winter, and my mother's journal. 23 pages of her handwriting, mostly fragmented, mostly unclear, but mine. The only thing that was fully mine. I walked out of Ashvale Keep at mid-morning. No one stopped me. A few people watched from windows. Old Ferrick, who worked the stables, pressed a small wrapped piece of bread into my hands as I passed. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. I walked through the iron gates. I walked into Morvain Forest. The trees swallowed me immediately, closing behind me like a curtain, cutting off the sound of the courtyard, the smell of wood smoke, the weight of all those eyes. The forest was cold and damp and very still. My bare feet found the moss between the roots. Somewhere far above, a bird called once and went silent. I was alone. I was completely, utterly alone. And then, deep in the trees ahead of me, maybe 200 meters, maybe less, I heard something. Not an animal, not wind, boots, moving fast, and voices. Low, urgent, controlled. I stopped walking. I pressed myself against the nearest trunk, bark rough against my back, mud cold between my toes, and I held my breath. Through the trees in the gray morning light, I saw them. 5 figures in dark traveling gear, moving through Morvain like they owned every tree in it. They moved with the kind of quiet that only came from years of training, or from being something that nothing in the forest would dare challenge. The one in front was tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair, a jaw cut from something harder than stone. He stopped. I don't know why. There was no reason for it. I hadn't made a sound. I hadn't moved. But he stopped. And he turned. And across 200 meters of old forest and gray morning light, through the trees and the mist and 17 years of silence, he looked directly at me. His eyes, even from that distance, were gold. Not amber. Not brown. Gold. Like something burning behind glass. He went completely still, and then he said something to the men beside him, too quiet for me to catch, and one of them grabbed his arm, like they were trying to stop him from doing something. He removed the hand, calmly, like removing a leaf, and he took one step toward me. Then the ring on my finger burned. Not painful, not dangerous, just awake, like something inside it had been asleep for 17 years and had just, finally, opened its eyes. Chapter 2. What my mother wrote. I ran. I'm not ashamed of it. Every instinct I had, every survival reflex built from years of being the smallest person in a room full of wolves, told me to move. So I moved. I tore through Morvain Forest, with my heart slamming against my ribs, dodging roots and ducking branches, the cold air burning in my lungs, and the ring on my finger still pulsing faintly, like a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. Behind me, nothing. No pursuit. No crashing footsteps. Just silence. Which almost scared me more. I didn't stop until I reached the Alder Creek crossroads, a full 2 kilometers east of Ashvale's border. There was an old way station there, a half-collapsed stone shelter that travelers used in bad weather. I had sheltered there once before, 3 winters ago, when Dreva sent me on an errand in a snowstorm and told me not to come back until it was done. I crawled inside, pulled my knees to my chest, pressed my back against the cold stone wall, and I opened my mother's journal. I had read it hundreds of times. I knew every word. But I read it again now, because something about those gold eyes had shaken loose a feeling I couldn't name, like a memory trying to surface from very deep water. My mother's handwriting was small and quick, like someone always writing in a hurry. The first pages were mundane, notes about herbs, about weather patterns, about plants that grew near moving water. But halfway through, the entries changed. One page in particular. I had read it so many times the paper was soft at the folds. I should not have gone to the Vorith summit. I knew that before I left, and I know it more clearly now. But Calder asked. And I was young, and I thought being asked by someone like Calder Dawnmere was the same as being chosen. It is not. I understand the difference now. He made me a promise at the summit. He said the words. He pressed the ring into my hands. His family's ring. A ring that had been in the Dawnmere line for 6 generations. And he said the words of a claiming promise. An unbreakable thing. A bond made before witnesses, before the moon, before the old laws. And then he left. And I never saw him again. I don't know if what grew inside me after was his knowing or his punishment. But she is mine. She has always been mine. And the ring belongs to her now. If the bond holds, and old bonds don't break, they only sleep, then one day someone will recognize it. Someone will recognize her. I pray it is someone worthy. I had read those words 1,000 times. I had never fully understood them. Calder Dawnmere, a claiming promise. A ring that had been in a bloodline for 6 generations. I turned the ring on my finger slowly, studying the symbol carved into the band. I had always assumed it was decorative. Now, in the flat gray light of the way station, I looked at it differently. It wasn't decorative. It was a crest. A howling wolf, stylized, ancient, set inside a crown of mountain peaks. My mouth went dry. I had seen that crest before. Once. On a piece of trade documentation that passed through Ashvale 2 years ago. A border agreement between 3 northern packs and 1 ruling house. I hadn't paid attention to the name at the time. I was just delivering the papers. The name on the seal hadn't meant anything to me. Dawnmere. I sat in that cold way station for a long time. The wind moved through the gaps in the stone. Somewhere outside, a stream ran over pebbles in the dark. I could hear my own breathing, too fast, then slower still. My mother had been bound to a Dawnmere by a claiming promise. The old kind. The unbreakable kind. Which meant, if the promise had been made before witnesses, and the moon, as she wrote, then the bond had not died when he left. It had transferred. Down through blood. Down through time. Down through whatever quiet inheritance moves between mothers and daughters. To me. To the ring. I pressed my palm flat against the cold stone floor. I needed to think clearly. I needed to trace this step by step, without panic. Fact, my mother had been given a Dawnmere ring as part of a claiming promise. Fact, she believed the bond was sleeping, not broken. Fact, a man with gold eyes, Dawnmere gold, I now realized, because I had heard the stories even in Ashvale, even from people who whispered about the ruling line like it was too large to say out loud, had seen me through 200 meters of morning forest and stopped like something had hit him. Fact, the ring had responded. I turned to the last page of my mother's journal, the one she had written the morning she died, while I sat beside her and held her hand and tried to be brave. Her handwriting there was slower, heavier. His name was Calder, but Calder's son, if he has one, and I believe he does, will carry the bond now. The ring will find him when it is ready. When she is ready. His son's name, I heard it spoken at the summit, a baby then, barely weeks old, was Raeth Dawnmere. The name sat in my chest like a stone dropped into deep water. Raeth. I had heard that name. Everyone had. You couldn't live in the northern packs, even on the margins, even as a ward, even as no one, without hearing the name Raeth Dawnmere eventually. Alpha King of the 6 territories, ruler of the Voreth line. The youngest Alpha King in 3 centuries. Cold, they said, controlled. Ruthless when he needed to be, and reportedly he needed to be often. Unmated. Still unmated, despite every pack in 6 territories sending their best daughters to his court. Unmated. Because, and this was the part that made the stone in my chest sink all the way to the bottom, old bonds didn't allow it. A Dawnmere who had made a claiming promise, even through bloodline transfer, could not take a true mate until the bond was either completed or formally dissolved. And dissolution required both parties. Which meant Raeth Dawnmere had been waiting, not knowing for what, not knowing for whom. And I had been in Ashvale, scrubbing floors, wearing his ring. I pressed the back of my hand to my mouth. Not to cry. I still hadn't cried. Not once. Not all day. But to hold in a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a scream. My whole life. My whole small, muddy, freezing, forgotten life. And this had been sitting on my finger the entire time. A knock at the way station door. 3 knocks. Measured. Not urgent. Not threatening. Patient. Like someone who had all the time in the world and had already decided they weren't leaving. I stood up slowly. I pressed my back against the far wall. I gripped my small knife in my right hand, ring hand tucked against my chest. "I'm not going to hurt you," said a voice outside, male, low, controlled. "But I think," the voice continued, calm as still water, "that you have something that belongs to my family, and I have been looking for it for a very long time." The ring pulsed once, hard, like a fist hitting a table, and then the door opened, and Raeth Dawnmere stepped inside. Chapter 3: The King and the Ward. He was taller than the trees had made him seem, or maybe it was the way station, low ceiling, cramped walls, barely enough space for 2 people, and a bad decision. He had to duck slightly to clear the doorframe, and when he straightened, the room shrank around him like it had no choice. He was maybe 23. 24 at most. Dark hair pushed back from his face, still damp at the edges from forest mist. He was wearing plain traveling clothes, dark gray, practical, no insignia, which told me he had deliberately dressed to move without being recognized. His jaw was sharp. His shoulders were the kind of broad that didn't come from vanity, but from years of carrying weight. And his eyes, gold, exactly as I'd seen from across the forest. But closer, they weren't simply gold. They were layered, amber at the outer edge, deeper amber within, and at the center, something darker, something that shifted when the light moved. Like embers, with something behind them. He looked at me for a long moment without speaking. I did not lower my knife. "You tracked me," I said. My voice came out steadier than I deserved. "Yes. Through 2 kilometers of forest. It wasn't difficult. He said it without arrogance, just fact. You left a trail, and the ring. He paused, something moving through his expression that I couldn't read. The ring pulls. Pulls, I repeated, to the Dawnmere bloodline. He said it carefully, like he was choosing each word. It always has. I've felt it pulling for years. I just never knew where. I stared at him. He stared back. Who are you? I asked, even though I already knew. I needed to hear him say it. I needed it to be real. My name is Raeth. He paused. Raeth Dawnmere. The way station air sat heavy between us. Alpha King of the 6 territories, I said flatly. Yes. And you think this ring belongs to your family? His eyes dropped to my hand, to the ring, still on my finger, still pulsing faintly. Something passed across his face. Not greed, not aggression. Something more complicated. Something that looked almost like recognition mixed with grief. That ring, he said quietly, was given to a woman named Raeth Vael at the Voreth Summit 18 years ago by my father, as part of a claiming promise. The air left my lungs. Raeth Vael, I said carefully, was my mother. The change in him was immediate and small. Most people would have missed it. A slight tension in his jaw. A very brief stillness, like a clock pausing between ticks. I know, he said. You know. I've known for approximately 6 hours. He moved very slightly, not toward me, just adjusting his weight, like he was trying to make himself less large in a small space. My archivist found a reference to a Raeth Vael and a ward child at Ashvale Pack 3 years ago. We've been tracking the connection since. Slowly. Too slowly. 3 years, I said. Something sharp moved through me. You've been looking for 3 years and you found me today. The same day Ashvale threw me out. A muscle moved in his jaw. Yes. That's convenient. It is not convenient, he said, and something in his voice went slightly colder. It is a failure of my intelligence network that I intend to address thoroughly. If I had found you sooner. He stopped, pressed his lips together, started again. If I had found you sooner, you would not have spent today standing in a courtyard being humiliated. I went very still. You know about that too. I had a scout in Ashvale, monitoring. When the pack convened at dawn, I was notified. His gold eyes met mine without flinching. I am sorry. For all of it. For what they did today, and for everything that came before it. You should not have been left there. There was something in the way he said it. Not performed. Not diplomatic. Just direct. Like a man who was very practiced at controlling everything except occasional honesty. I didn't know what to do with it. I lowered my knife. Not because I trusted him. I had not survived 17 years in a pack that didn't want me by extending trust carelessly, but because the knife had stopped feeling relevant. He could have come through that door with 4 men and taken the ring already. He hadn't. He came alone. That meant something. My mother wrote about your father, I said. Called her Dawnmere. A shadow crossed his face. Grief. Quiet and old. He died 4 years ago. I'm sorry. He was... Raeth paused like he was choosing between truths. He was a complicated man. He made mistakes he spent his whole life trying to account for. Leaving your mother was the one he never resolved. I turned the ring slowly on my finger. The pulse had quieted, not gone, just calm now, like something that had been anxious and had finally settled. What does the claiming promise mean? I asked. For me, specifically, in practical terms. He looked at me steadily. I noticed he did not look away when the questions got hard. I noticed that very carefully. In old law, he said, a claiming promise made by a Dawnmere before the moon and witnesses creates a permanent bond. It cannot be broken unilaterally, and it transfers through bloodline. So the bond is between you and me. Yes. A bond you didn't choose. No, I didn't. And I didn't choose it either. No, he paused. You didn't. I looked at him. He looked at me. The wind moved through the stone gaps, and the creek outside kept running, and somewhere a bird landed in a branch and immediately left again. What do you want? I asked. It was the most direct question I knew how to ask. In Ashvale, it was the question you had to ask fast, before people buried their intentions under politeness. Raeth Dawnmere, Alpha King of the 6 territories, was quiet for a moment. I want to honor what my father should have honored 18 years ago, he said. I want to bring you to Voreth. I want you to understand what you are and what you're owed. And then, another pause, shorter this time. I want you to decide what you want to do with it. I'm a ward, I said. I have no rank, no pack, no family, no... You are wearing the Dawnmere promise ring, he said, which makes you, under old law, the recognized bond heir of the Dawnmere line. He let that land. That is not no rank. The stone in my chest had become something else, not lighter, just different. Something that had weight, but also had edges, something I could hold on to. I need to think, I said. Of course. And I need shoes. The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. The ghost of something that might become a smile in a different life. We have supplies, he said. Outside, take what you need. He turned to leave. Raeth. The name felt strange in my mouth. Too large. He stopped, hand at the doorframe. If I come with you, if I decide to come, I am not doing it because an old law says I have to. I'm not doing anything anymore because someone says I have to. He turned his head just enough to meet my eyes. Understood, he said. And something in the way he said it told me that he meant it. That was the second thing I noticed carefully. I walked out of the way station into the cold Morvain afternoon, slid a pair of borrowed boots onto my frozen feet, and looked at the gray sky through the old black branches. My mother had pressed this ring into my palm and told me it would know when it was time. She had been right. The question was I ready for what it knew? Chapter 4, Voreth. We traveled for 2 days. Raeth's small party was 4 people besides himself, a scout named Orin, who had the kind of face that forgot itself the moment you looked away from it, a healer called Tessely, who gave me the boots and a heavy wool cloak without being asked, and 2 guards whose names I wasn't given, who positioned themselves at the rear like shadows that had learned to walk upright. We moved mostly in silence. I was good at silence. Years in Ashvale had taught me that quiet was the only private space you could carry with you. I watched instead of talked. I catalogued. Raeth moved differently from other alphas I had seen. Most pack alphas performed their authority constantly, broad gestures, raised voices, the visible effort of making sure everyone in the room felt the weight of them. Raeth didn't perform anything. He simply was what he was, and the space around him organized itself accordingly. His men watched him without staring. They anticipated him without hovering. When he changed direction, they adjusted without being told. It was the most disciplined unit I had ever seen. And he didn't look at me. Not in an unkind way. Not deliberately. It felt more like he was being careful, giving me space, treating me like something fragile that he was trying not to startle, which was strange, from an Alpha King. Most powerful men treated caution as weakness. He treated it like a choice. On the morning of the 2nd day, we crested a ridge and I saw Voreth for the first time. I stopped walking. I had heard about it. Everyone had. But hearing about it and seeing it were entirely different things, in the way that hearing about the ocean and standing in front of it are entirely different things. Voreth Keep rose from a mountain shelf like it had grown there, not built, grown. Gray stone towers with dark slate roofs, nested against a sheer cliff face, the whole structure wrapped around a natural plateau that looked over a valley of pine forest stretching as far as light could reach. Waterfalls came off the cliff in 2 places, thin and white against the gray stone. Below the plateau, the valley was morning gold, pine tops catching early sun. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was also enormous. I had lived my entire life in Raeth Vael Keep, which held maybe 300 wolves at full capacity. Vorith looked like it could hold a small country. "How many people?" I asked, which were the first words I had said since breakfast. Raeth was standing beside me. He had stopped when I stopped, which I hadn't expected. "The keep itself, around 2,000, he said. "The territory households, roughly 11,000. You know all of them?" He glanced at me sideways. "Not personally, but I know their pack records, their histories." A pause. "Their problems. You study your own people. Constantly." I looked at the valley below. "Did you know about Raeth Vael? What it was like there?" The pause was long enough to be an answer. "I knew it was a mid-rank pack with an unstable power structure," he said carefully. "I knew the Beta's household had consolidated significant control in the last decade. I did not know, not until 3 days ago, the specific conditions of your situation." "Conditions," I repeated quietly. "I am sorry," he said. Again, without flinching. I turned away from the view and started walking toward the gates. Inside Vorith Keep, everything was stone and iron and history. The floors were dark granite, worn smooth. The walls held torches in iron brackets, and between them, tapestries, pack histories, battle records, the woven stories of the Dawnmere line going back 6 generations. I tried not to stare. I stared anyway. Tessely walked beside me through the main corridor and spoke quietly, not making a performance of the orientation. "Guest quarters in the East Wing," she said. "Meals at whatever hour suits you. The kitchens are staffed through the night. If you need anything, clothing, supplies, anything at all, you come to me directly." "I don't need charity," I said. Old reflex. 18 years of it. Tessely looked at me calmly. She was maybe 40, with gray-streaked hair and very direct eyes. "It isn't charity," she said. "You are a guest of the Alpha King. What you're given is called hospitality." She paused, just a beat. "There is a difference." I thought about that. "All right," I said. My room in the East Wing was larger than the entire storage room I had slept in for 8 years at Raeth Vael. Stone walls hung with dark green tapestries, a wide bed with thick wool blankets, a fireplace already lit, a window seat overlooking the waterfall on the north side of the keep. A copper bathing tub had been filled. A set of simple, clean clothes, dark trousers, a gray tunic, a heavier overshirt, had been laid out. I stood in the middle of the room for a long moment. I had never had a room before. My whole life. Not one that was mine. I sat on the edge of the bed. The wool was soft under my hands. I breathed. I did not cry. But it was closer than it had been all week. That evening, Raeth sent word asking if I would eat dinner in the Great Hall or prefer a tray in my room. I chose the tray. He did not push. The tray arrived with more food than I had been given in a week at Raeth Vael: roasted meat, dark bread, a thick root vegetable stew that smelled like something my mother used to make on cold mornings. I ate slowly, cross-legged on the floor by the fire, with my mother's journal open in my lap. I reread the entry about Raeth Dawnmere. I reread it twice. And then I turned to a page near the middle of the journal that I'd always found confusing. An entry my mother had written in something like code, words fragmented across the page in a way that felt deliberate. "Raeth," it said. Just the name, at the top. "If she finds him, when she finds him, tell her this." He was not told. Calder never told him. He grew up believing the promise line ended with me. He does not know about her. He cannot know until she chooses. Tell her to choose with clear eyes. Not from fear. Not from the old law. From choice. That was what I never got. I want her to have it. My eyes stung. I pressed my fingers against the page. He does not know about her. He hadn't known. Until 3 years ago, when his archivist found the connection. He had spent 20-some years living with an old bond pulling at him, not knowing where it led or why, unable to take a true mate, unable to fully understand the weight around him. He had been trapped too, just differently. I looked at the ring. "All right, Mum," I whispered. "I see it now." Tomorrow I decided I would go to Raeth Dawnmere and have an honest conversation. Not from the old law, not from fear, from choice. Outside my window, the waterfall ran white over dark stone, and the valley below was swallowed in purple dusk. And somewhere in the deep forest at the edge of the Werewolf Plateau, a wolf howled once, long and low and searching. I listened to it until it faded. Then I slept. Properly, for the first time in 17 years. Chapter 5. The council smells blood. I should have known that a good night's sleep was just the story's way of gathering strength before hitting me again. The council found out about me by morning. I don't know who told them. Tessely suspected the gate guard's log. Voreth kept meticulous records, and a guest registered under no pack affiliation, escorted in personally by the Alpha King, flagged immediately. By the time I woke and dressed and found my way to the small East Wing dining room, Raeth's senior archivist, a narrow-faced man named Councilman Drest, was already waiting for me at the table. He stood when I entered. The standing was not courtesy. It was the kind of standing that telegraphs dominance, getting height, getting position, filling the room with himself before I could settle. I had grown up around wolves like him. I knew the move. I walked to the far side of the table, pulled out the chair that put my back to the wall and the door in my sightline, and sat down first. His eyes flickered. Small calculation. "Miss Vael," he said, sitting. "I'm Councilman Drest, head of the Voreth Governing Council. I thought we might speak, given the—" He paused, a careful smile. "Unusual nature of your arrival." "Speak," I said. "Of course." He folded his hands on the table. "I'll be direct. It's come to our attention that you were brought in as a ward-class rogue from Ash Vale, and that you carry an item claimed to be the Dawnmere promise ring." He said claimed carefully, like a blade placed flat on a table. "The Council would like to verify the item's authenticity and understand what exactly Alpha Raeth's intentions are regarding your presence here." "He invited me," I said. "I accepted." "Yes." Another careful pause. "But surely you understand that the presence of an unknown, unranked rogue in the Alpha King's keep, claiming a bond connection to the Dawnmere line, raises questions that the Council is responsible for addressing." I looked at him. He was good. The language was reasonable, measured. Every sentence built just enough legitimacy to make the next demand feel natural. "What kind of verification?" I asked. "A formal assessment by the Pack's head archivist. Blood reading, ring registration, full lineage documentation." He tilted his head. "Standard protocol, of course. And if I decline? Then the Council would need to consider whether your continued residence here is appropriate." He smiled again, warm as October mud. "We have the Pack's well-being to consider." I studied him. He was afraid, under all the careful language, afraid. Not of me personally, of what I represented. An unknown variable in a system he had spent years making predictable. "I'd like to speak with Raeth before agreeing to anything," I said. "Alpha Raeth is in morning council session. Then I'll wait." Silence. Drest looked at me with eyes that had recalculated something. "As you wish," he said. He stood. This time the standing had a different quality. Not dominance, something more like recalibration. He left. I ate breakfast alone and thought hard. Raeth found me an hour later in the East Corridor, walking with Tessely. His expression when he approached told me Drest had already spoken to him. "You handled him well," was the first thing he said. "He was testing me," I said. "Yes." "He's afraid of what I represent to the Council dynamic." "The Council has been managing the unmated Alpha situation for 3 years, Raeth said, walking beside me, Tessely hanging back at a diplomatic distance. "Several of them have their own candidates positioned. If the promise ring claim is legitimate, and it is, those positions become irrelevant." So they'll try to discredit it. They'll try to discredit you. He said it plainly, without apology. They'll investigate your lineage, your mother's history, your years at Ashvale. They'll look for anything that makes the bond claim challengeable under current law. And will they find it? He looked at me sideways. Current law requires a living witness to the original promise. My father is dead. Your mother is dead. The witnesses at the Raeth Summit 18 years ago? He paused. 2 are dead. 1 is in the Western Territories. 1 I cannot locate. So they can challenge it? Legally, yes. Unless the ring speaks for itself. I looked down at my hand. What does that mean? The Dawnmere promise ring was made by the first alpha of our line. It has properties. Under specific conditions, it can provide its own evidence of a legitimate bond. He paused. But those conditions require willingness. From both parties. Both parties. I looked up at him. He was already looking at me. This is complicated, I said. Extremely, he agreed. I need more time. You have it. And I need access to the Raeth archive, my mother's entry, anything about the summit 18 years ago. He nodded immediately. Done. And Raeth. He stopped. Don't fight the council for me. Not yet. Let me understand what I'm walking into before you burn anything down. Something moved in his gold eyes. Respect, maybe. Or something that had been dormant and was waking up slowly, the way the ring had woken up. Agreed, he said. I spent the rest of the day in the archive. What I found there cracked something open that could not be closed again. The Raeth Summit records from 18 years ago were filed in a locked section that Raeth had opened with his personal seal. I read for 4 hours, stopping only when Tessely brought tea that went cold at my elbow. Calder Dawnmere had made the claiming promise to my mother, witnessed by 3 senior pack members and performed under the full moon of the autumn equinox, the most binding, possible conditions under old Dawnmere law. And then, 3 months later, he had signed a council agreement declaring the promise void, without my mother's signature, without her knowledge, without her consent. The council at the time had helped him do it, had drafted the document, had filed it as legitimate. It was fraud. An 18-year-old fraud, buried in a locked archive, committed by a council that had decided a rogue girl was not good enough for their alpha's son. I sat back in my chair. The cold tea steamed faintly in the firelight. So my mother had spent her whole life believing in a bond that the council had tried to erase, had carried the ring and the truth and the belief that it mattered, while powerful men filed papers to say it didn't. And she had been right. Because old bonds don't break. They only sleep. I pressed my ring hand flat against the archive table. Dreva had thrown me into the mud and told me I was nothing. Drest had looked at me across a breakfast table and tried to paper me back into invisibility. And the council 18 years ago had tried to erase my mother from history. But here I was, still here, with the ring awake on my finger and the Alpha King's archive open in front of me, and the full truth finally in my hands. My mother had told me, choose with clear eyes, not from fear, not from old law, from choice. I understood now what she'd been asking. She'd been asking me to do what she never could. I stood up, gathered the documents, and went to find Raeth Dawnmere. Chapter 6. What the Ring Remembers. I found him on the north terrace. He was standing at the stone railing, looking out over the valley, which had filled with evening mist that softened the pine tops into something almost gentle. He still had his council clothes on, dark fitted jacket, the Dawnmere crest at the collar, but his posture was different out here. Less formal. Not vulnerable exactly, but real. The kind of real that people only let themselves be when they think nobody's watching. He heard me coming. Of course he did. He was a Dawnmere Alpha. But he didn't turn immediately. He waited until I was standing beside him at the railing before he looked at me. I set the documents on the stone between us. He looked down at them. You found it, he said. You knew it was in there. I suspected, he said. I only gained full access to the sealed archive 6 months ago, when I turned 23 and completed the Alpha Inheritance protocols. There were things in there He stopped. A long pause over the valley. There were things I wasn't prepared for. The council forged a dissolution, I said. 18 years ago, without my mother's knowledge or consent. Yes. They committed fraud to erase a legitimate bond. Yes. And you've known this for 6 months. He turned to look at me fully. I've known for 6 months. I spent 3 of those months having it verified by 2 independent legal scholars, and the last 3 trying to locate you. So the council members who did this, some of them are still on your council now. Drest's predecessor was the primary architect, he said. Drest himself inherited the position, but the sealed records suggest he accessed this file 2 years ago. A muscle moved in his jaw, which means he has known for 2 years, and said nothing. The rage I felt was clean, cold, not the hot, helpless kind, the kind that knows what to do with itself. What are you planning to do? I asked. That, he said quietly, depends significantly on you. I looked at him. The evening light had gone amber, and in it his gold eyes were warmer, less like something burning and more like something lit from inside. The ring, I said. You said it could provide its own evidence, under specific conditions, willing parties. Yes. What does that actually mean, practically? He turned to face me more directly. The original ring, when the first Dawnmere Alpha created it, was bonded to a specific kind of acknowledgement, a mutual one. If both the ring-bearer and the bond heir consciously acknowledge the bond, the ring will, he paused, choosing the word carefully, it will speak. It will produce a visible record that cannot be faked or disputed, a light signature tied to the specific bond's origin point, verifiable under old law as primary evidence. Like the ring testifying, I said. Exactly like that. I turned the ring on my finger. The pulse was steady now, not excited, not anxious, just present, like it was listening. And if I choose to do this, I said, I'm not agreeing to anything beyond the evidence. I'm not agreeing to a mating. I'm not agreeing to stay. I'm agreeing to let the ring tell the truth. He held my gaze. Yes, those are exactly the terms. Evidence only. Whatever comes after is your choice. Completely. I believed him, which still felt strange to do with someone I had known for 3 days. How does it work? I asked. We both need to consciously acknowledge the bond. Out loud. I say the words of the original promise, the ones my father said to your mother. You acknowledge that the ring was given in that context, and that you accept its history. He paused. That's all. The ring does the rest. The mist in the valley had thickened, and the last light was going bronze and fading, and the waterfall on the north face was a white line in the gathering dark. All right, I said. He straightened slightly. Not dramatically, just the subtle shift of someone taking something seriously. He turned toward me. I turned toward him. We were close, maybe 3 feet apart, and the air between us had a texture to it, something I felt in my sternum without knowing what to call it. He spoke the words in the old tongue first. I didn't know them, but the sound of them was familiar in a way that had nothing to do with my ears. It was my blood that recognized them. Something cellular and ancestral, something my mother had carried and passed on without explanation. Then he translated them, quietly, into common speech. I see you. I name you. I will not walk past you again. Those 7 words. That was the whole promise. I see you. I name you. I will not walk past you again. My throat tightened. Not from the magic, from the simplicity of it. 3 sentences. That was all it had ever taken. My mother's whole life. A rogue in the mud. A ward child. A ring on her finger that nobody believed in. It had all been waiting for someone to just say those 7 words back. I acknowledge the ring, I said, my voice steady. Given in promise. Carried in good faith. Mine by inheritance and by right. The ring burned, Not painfully, brilliantly. The symbol on the band, the howling wolf inside the crown of peaks, lit up gold. Not gold like paint or gold like metal. Gold like sunlight. Like actual concentrated light coming through something solid. The ring glowed on my finger, steady and absolute, and the light it threw was warm and it touched the stone railing and the evening mist and the plains of Raeth's face. He looked at it. Something in his expression broke open. Very quietly. The controlled, careful face, just for a moment, let something through that was older than composure. "There," he said, very low. The light held for a count of maybe 10 seconds. Then it gentled, dimmed to that familiar soft pulse, and settled. But it left something behind. The air on the terrace was different. Not charged exactly, just certain. Like something that had been uncertain for 18 years had finally made up its mind. I looked at my hand. "Will that be enough?" I asked. "For the council?" "Combined with the forged dissolution documents," he said, and his voice had a different quality now. Focused, forward-facing, the voice of someone making a plan. "It will be more than enough. The fraud alone, without the ring's testimony, would be enough to remove Drest. With it," he paused, "with it, the original bond is fully restored under old law, the dissolution is nullified, and your status as Dawnmere bond heir is legally unassailable. And then what?" He looked at me. The gold in his eyes had settled too, the same way the ring had settled. Less intensity, more depth. "Then," he said, "you decide. You're not bound to stay. You're not bound to me. The law protects you. It doesn't command you." A pause. "I would like you to stay. But that's a preference, not a requirement." I looked at the valley below, drowned in mist now, the pine tops invisible. I thought about Ashvale, about mud and cold floors, and the weight of being barely tolerated. I thought about my mother, dying at 32 in a storage room with a ring on her finger and a story she never got to finish. I thought about 7 words. "I see you. I name you. I will not walk past you again." "I'll stay," I said. "For now. Long enough to see this through." He nodded. Simple. No victory in it. "Thank you," he said. Just that. We stood on the terrace a little longer, not speaking, while the valley turned fully dark below us, and the first stars appeared above the cliff face, and the waterfall ran white and steady in the dark. The ring pulsed quietly on my finger, patient, awake, present. Chapter 7. The Council Moves. The council struck 3 days later. I should have seen it coming sooner. I did see it coming. I felt it in the way conversations changed when I entered rooms, the way certain staff members stopped meeting my eyes, the way Drest smiled at me too pleasantly every time we passed in a corridor. Pleasant like a tripwire, pleasant like a closing door. What I didn't know was the shape of what they'd built while I was busy learning to trust. They had found someone. Her name was Veratis Holst, 22 years old. Eldest daughter of the Holst line, one of the wealthiest and oldest pack families in the Southern Territories. Ranked Gamma by birth, poised for beta elevation, educated at the Voreth Council School, trained in diplomatic protocol, fluent in 3 languages. She was everything on paper that I was not. And Drest had brought her to Voreth. I found out the way you find out everything important in a keep from the kitchens. Tessely told me bluntly over a pot of tea, with the expression of someone delivering news that needs to be heard clearly. "Drest invited her 2 weeks ago," Tessely said. "Before you arrived. It was meant to be a formal introduction. The council's recommended match for the Alpha King." "And now?" I asked. "Now she's here, and the council intends to use her presence as leverage." Tessely set down her cup. "There will be a formal dinner, tonight. You are not on the guest list." I absorbed this. "They're trying to move fast," I said. "Before the archive documents go through legal verification." "Yes, How long does the legal process take? The independent scholars Raeth retained are traveling, 7 days minimum before they can submit a formal opinion. 7 days. And the council wanted to push a competing match into place in 7 hours. Where is Raeth? I asked. In session with Drest right now. Tessely met my eyes. He doesn't know about the dinner yet. It was scheduled through the household steward, not through him. I stood up. Don't, Tessely said quietly. Not directly. Not right now. If you go in there angry, Drest will use it. He'll frame it as the rogue ward making a scene. I stopped. She was right. I knew she was right. 18 years in Ashvale had taught me exactly this, that anger without strategy is just fuel for the people who want you to burn. What do? I asked. Tessely looked at me steadily. You attend the dinner, she said, properly dressed, calm, undeniable. I stared at her. I'm not on the guest list. You're the Dawnmere bond heir, she said simply. There is no guest list that supersedes that. Drest knows it. He's hoping you don't. I thought about that for a moment. Then I said, I need something to wear. The dinner was in the great hall at 8th Bell. The table was 40 feet long, lit with iron chandeliers, the Dawnmere tapestry spanning the full back wall. The council members sat in ranked positions. Veratis Holst sat 2 seats from Raeth's right hand, close enough to be a statement. She was striking. I will not pretend otherwise. Dark copper hair arranged perfectly, a gown the color of deep water, posture so correct it looked sculpted. She had the ease of someone who had been prepared for rooms like this their whole life. I walked in when the first course was already being served. Tessely had found me a gown, deep charcoal gray, simple lines, nothing decorative except the iron-colored embroidery at the neckline that I didn't look at too closely until I was already wearing it. When I did look, I realized it was Tessely's quiet subversion. The embroidery was the Dawnmere mountain crest. Subtle. Absolutely intentional. The room noticed me immediately. Drest noticed me immediately. His pleasant expression went flat for just a moment before snapping back into place. Raeth noticed me. He stood up. It was a small thing. Automatic, maybe. Or maybe not. But an alpha king standing when someone enters a room is not a small signal in a room full of wolves who track every signal. He pulled out the chair at his left hand. Seren, he said. His voice was entirely even. I'm glad you're here. Drest's pleasant expression did not recover. Veratis looked at me with the careful, measuring attention of someone who had been briefed, and whose briefing had just been disrupted. I sat at Raeth's left hand. I set my ring hand on the table, visible, the Dawnmere crest gleaming quietly in the candlelight. The dinner began. It was the most civilized battle I had ever witnessed. Drest managed the conversation like a master, steering towards subjects that emphasized Veratis's lineage, her accomplishments, her family's political alliances. Veratis was gracious and polished, and handled every question with the ease of years of training. Several council members threw pointed observations about the value of well-documented bloodlines and established pack alliances into the conversation with the casual precision of people who had rehearsed. I ate my food. I listened. I did not rise to any of it. Raeth, beside me, contributed to the conversation in a measured way that gave nothing away. He was good at that, the controlled neutral surface. But twice, when a particularly pointed comment landed, his hand on the table moved slightly closer to mine. Not touching, just closer. It was Councilwoman Bertha, who I had not met before, a broad-shouldered woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a voice like a drawbridge, who finally fired the direct shot. Alpha Raeth, she said, setting down her wine cup with deliberate calm, given the council's concern about the pack's stability, and given that the claim from the rogue ward has yet to clear legal verification, do you not feel it would be prudent to delay any informal recognition until the matter is properly settled? The table went quiet. Raeth looked at Bertha. The matter, he said calmly, is settled. Bertha blinked. The legal scholars haven't... The legal scholars will confirm what I already know." He reached into his jacket and placed a folded document on the table. "This is my father's personal correspondence regarding the Vorth Summit, recovered from his private archive, his own handwriting, witnessed and authenticated by the Vorth head notary this afternoon." He paused. "He names Lisa Vael. He names the promise. He names the ring. In his own words. I had not known about the letter." Drest's face had changed color. Raeth looked at him directly. "I believe, Councilman Drest, that you accessed the sealed archive 2 years ago. I believe you read the forged dissolution documents. And I believe you chose not to inform me." He paused. "Just a beat. We will discuss your future on this council at a more appropriate time." The silence that followed was absolute. Veratis looked at me across the table. Her expression was not cruel. It was something more complicated, the look of someone who had been used as a pawn and was only now fully realizing it. I met her eyes. I gave her a small nod, not triumphant. Just acknowledgement. She had done nothing wrong. She had been placed here by people with bad intentions, and that wasn't her fault. She looked away. After dinner in the corridor, Raeth walked beside me in silence for a moment. "You didn't tell me about the letter," I said. "I found it this morning," he said. "I wanted to wait until I had it authenticated. I didn't want to give you hope and then have it fall through. I thought about that. You protected my expectations," I said slowly. "I tried. I searched for the word, unusually considerate." "I have a lot of ground to make up," he said simply. We reached the east corridor. He stopped at the junction that split toward my wing. "Seren." His voice was quiet. "I need to ask you something directly." "Ask." "Do you want this? Not the legal protection, not the bond, not the status." He met my eyes. "Do you want to be here?" I thought about my answer carefully. I owed him that, and myself. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'm not leaving." He nodded. Slowly. "That's enough," he said. Chapter 8. What was taken. I found the letter that broke me on a Tuesday morning. Not Raeth's father's letter. A different one. I had been spending hours each day in the archive, building my knowledge of Dawnmere law, old bond protocols, the legal framework I was now standing inside. Raeth had given me full access. He never questioned what I was doing in there, or why. He would sometimes come in, set a cup of tea near my elbow without speaking, and leave. I had started to recognize that this was his way of showing care, quiet and practical. Nothing performed about it. But that Tuesday morning, I found something that hadn't been filed in the sealed section. It was in the general correspondence archive, a letter, misfiled probably, tucked inside a batch of old trade records from 18 years ago. It was addressed to my mother, from Raeth Dawnmere. I recognized the name on the outside and my hands stopped moving. I opened it slowly. It was 1 page. Short. Written in a hand that was slightly unsteady, emotion or haste, I couldn't tell. "Lisa, I know what the council has done. I know about the dissolution papers. I did not sign them willingly. I want you to understand that, even if this letter is the only place I am ever able to say it. They told me you had left. They told me the ring was returned. They told me you wanted no contact. I was young enough and weak enough to believe it. By the time I learned the truth, they told me you were gone. Moved on. No forwarding. I tried to find you for 2 years. I failed. I am sorry. I know that is nothing. I am writing this because I cannot send it. I don't know where you are. But I cannot carry it unsaid either. I hope you are somewhere warm. I hope whatever we made together, if we made something, has a better life than we gave it. Calder. I sat at the archive table for a long time. My mother had never received this letter. She had spent her whole life believing he had walked away voluntarily. She had died believing that. She had loved a man who was taken from her by the same council fraud that tried to take everything from both of them. And she had never known. The grief that moved through me was not mine alone. It was hers. It was his. It was the grief of two people kept apart by other people's power and convenience, a grief that had been waiting 18 years in a misfiled letter for someone to finally read it. I pressed my hands over my face, and I cried. Finally. Properly. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper than the chest, that has nothing to do with the immediate day, and everything to do with every day that came before it. I cried for my mother in her storage room. I cried for 9-year-old me, holding her hand while she died. I cried for Raeth Dawnmere writing a letter he could never send. I cried for all the years of mud and cold, and being told I was nothing. I cried until it was done. Then I wiped my face, folded the letter carefully, held it in my hands. Raeth came in an hour later with tea. He stopped when he saw my face. He didn't ask. He set the tea down. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, and he waited. I slid the letter across the table. He read it once, then again. He set it down very carefully. He didn't know, I said. My voice was rough. Your father didn't walk away. He was deceived the same way my mother was. Yes, Raeth said. Did you know? He met my eyes. No. I thought he left voluntarily. I spent 20 years being quietly angry at him for it. He paused. He died, never knowing he had a daughter. That landed between us like something irretrievable. This letter, I said, combined with everything else. It's damning, he said quietly. It shows the council's fraud was active, deliberate, and caused direct harm to both parties. Can I keep it? It was written to your mother, he said. It belongs to you. I folded it again and put it in my pocket, against my heart. We sat in the archive for a while, not talking. The fire burned low. The stack of documents between us represented 18 years of damage done in neat administrative handwriting. I want to address the pack, I said eventually. He looked at me. Not the council, not in legal proceedings, the whole pack. I met his eyes. I want to stand in front of them and tell them who I am, where I came from, what was done. I paused. I am done being invisible. I am done being handled quietly. If the bond is real, if I'm what the ring says I am, then I should be able to stand in front of these people and say so. Raeth studied me for a long moment. The council will oppose it, he said. Yes. Drest will call it a manipulation tactic. Yes. The timing, with the scholars still traveling, is not legally ideal. I know. He held my gaze. All right, he said. Just like that? You're right, he said simply. You should not have to be invisible. Not here. Not anymore. A pause. When? I thought about it. 3 days, I said. Give me 3 days to prepare. He nodded. I'll have the great court cleared. He started to rise, and I said, Raeth. He stopped. Did you love your father? I asked. It was a strange question. I didn't know why I asked it, except that I felt like I needed to know who Raeth Dawnmere was to someone who had actually known him. Raeth sat back down. I did, he said. He was complicated and flawed, and he carried something heavy for a long time that I didn't understand. But yes. He paused. I loved him. He was trying, I said quietly. He wrote the letter. He wrote the letter, Raeth agreed. It wasn't resolution. It wasn't forgiveness. Not my place to give that. But it was something. Some small reclamation. Outside the archive window, the waterfall ran white over dark stone, and the mountain above Voreth was lost in low cloud, and somewhere in the great hall below, I could hear the distant sounds of a pack going about its daily life. Voices, movement, children. 11,000 people in this territory. And in 3 days, I was going to stand in front of as many of them as could fit in the great court, with a ring on my finger and the truth in my hands. And I was going to say, I am Seren Vael, and I am not going to be quiet anymore. I pressed my fingers against the letter in my pocket. I hope whatever we made together has a better life than we gave it. Yes, Calder. Me, too. Chapter 9. The Great Court. The morning of the address, Drest made his final move. I was in my room, dressed and ready, Tessely helping me pin my hair back in the way I had chosen. Simple, away from my face, nothing decorative except the ring on my hand. I had decided to wear the same charcoal gray gown from the dinner. No new display, no costume. Just me, as I was. The knock at my door came at 7th bell. One of Raeth's junior guards, face carefully neutral. Councilman Drest requests a meeting before the address, the guard said. He says it's urgent. I looked at Tessely. She looked back at me. Your call. Where? I asked. The council anteroom. Tell him I'll meet him in the main corridor, I said. In the open, in 10 minutes. He was waiting where I'd specified, in the broad main corridor outside the Great Court entrance, where the morning foot traffic of the keep moved around us. He had chosen, I noticed, to bring 2 council members with him. Witnesses or pressure, possibly both. I came alone. He looked at the absence of a support person briefly. Then he smiled the tripwire smile. Miss Vael, he said, I'll be brief. Before you do this, and I understand your intentions, I want to give you an opportunity to reconsider. Go ahead, I said. The legal situation is genuinely unresolved, he said, tone reasonable, hands clasped. The scholars haven't submitted their opinion. The ring's testimony, while remarkable, has no modern legal precedent. What you're about to do will divide this pack. It will create uncertainty. It will make 11,000 people aware of what their council did 18 years ago, I said. He paused. That's an unverified characterization. I have Calder Dawnmere's personal letter, I said, describing exactly what your predecessor did and how it was done. And I have the forged dissolution documents. And I have the ring's testimony from the North Terrace 5 days ago, witnessed by Tessely and Oren. I held his gaze. There's nothing unverified about it. The council members behind him shifted. Drest's smile had become something rigid. You are making a very significant decision on limited experience of this world, he said. Quieter now. Not threatening. Worse than threatening. Almost paternal. You've been in Voreth for less than a week. You came from a mid-rank ward position. These are powerful mechanisms you're touching. Mistakes can't be unmade. No, I agreed. They can't. The ones made 18 years ago certainly couldn't. Something moved in his eyes. Not exactly fear. The recognition of a cornered thing. Dressed, I said very quietly. I grew up being told I was nothing, by people who were afraid of what I was. I understand now that the fear was the tell. I looked at him steadily. You're afraid right now. I can see it, and I understand it. I paused, but I'm going to walk into that court regardless. I walked past him. The Great Court was the largest indoor space in Voreth, a stone amphitheater built into the keep's interior, with tiered standing areas and a central floor. At full capacity, it held 3,000 people. That morning, it was close to full. Pack members of every rank had come. Senior wolves, young families, workers from the valley households, kitchen staff, stable hands, scholars. The full spectrum. Raeth had not limited the invitation. He was already on the central floor, standing at the right side of the speaking position, his presence neither dominating nor absent, just there, steady and clear, the way a good structure stands before you need it. He looked at me when I came in. I walked to the speaking position. The court went quiet. I stood for a moment in that silence. 3,000 faces looking at me. 3,000 people who had lived their lives inside this pack, under this law, knowing nothing of what had been hidden in that archive. I thought of my mother. I thought of Calder's letter. I thought of 7 words. I see you. I name you. I will not walk past you again. And I spoke. I told them everything. I started with my mother, who she was, where she came from, what was promised to her. I told them about the ring, and the old law, and the Vorith summit 18 years ago. I told them about the fraud, the forged dissolution, the council's action, the letter that never arrived. I told them about Ashvale, the mud, the ward status, the morning they threw me out. I did not perform it. I did not beg for their sympathy. I told it the way you tell the truth, plainly, with my feet on the ground, and my hands steady and my voice clear. And when I held up the ring and spoke the acknowledgement words, just the short ones, just the essential ones, the ring lit up again. Gold light in the stone court. Absolute silence. Some people gasped. One child near the front said something quiet to her mother. An old wolf in the upper tiers made the old sign, fingers crossed over the heart, the gesture of witness. Several others followed. The light held. And then Raeth stepped forward. He came to stand beside me, not in front of me. Beside me. He did not speak loudly. He didn't need to. The bond is real, he said. The history is documented. The fraud is provable and will be addressed. He paused. What happens next will be handled through proper legal resolution. But what I want this pack to know today is this. Seren Vael is not a ward. She is not a rogue. She is the Dawnmere bond heir, recognized under old law, welcomed into this pack by my acknowledgement and her own right. He looked at me briefly. She is not invisible. She has not been invisible since the moment this ring was pressed into her mother's hands. We were simply not looking. The court was very still. Then Oren, taciturn, expressionless Oren, who I had barely heard speak in a week, put his hand over his heart. One gesture, the gesture of recognition, of witness. 3 seconds later, a third of the court had done the same. It spread slowly, quietly, like water finding level, until the stone walls held it back and the iron chandeliers caught the light of 3,000 hands over 3,000 hearts. I stood in it. I did not cry this time. This time, I let myself simply feel it. The full, undeniable weight of being seen. Behind the council members' seating area, I saw Drest standing at the rear entrance. He turned and left before the gesture had fully finished spreading. Chapter 10. What Was Always Mine. The legal scholars arrived 6 days later. They submitted their opinion in writing, formal and binding, 8 pages dense with old law citations and documentary evidence. Their conclusion was unambiguous. The dissolution filed 18 years ago was fraudulent under old Dawnmere law, executed without the required dual consent, and therefore legally void from the moment of its creation. The bond had never broken. It had only slept. The formal council hearing was held in the smaller chamber off the great court. Deliberately, Raeth had chosen the space to limit theater and maximize documentation. Drest was present, stripped of his council seniority pending the investigation outcome. The 2 council members who had stood with him in the corridor were present as witnesses. It took 4 hours. At the end of it, the fraudulent dissolution was officially expunged from the Vorith record. Drest was removed from council. The council members who had maintained silence about the file were placed on formal review. Restitution proceedings against the implicated council families were opened for the Vael estate, such as it was, modest, but real. My mother's standing as a legitimate bond recipient was restored posthumously. Her name was added to the Vorith